Welcome to Kla-How-Ya. My name is Rick Sagiet. Kla-How-Ya is sponsored by the Vernon Friendship Center located at 2902 29th Avenue here in Vernon. On November 11th, Remembrance Day, we honor the sacrifices made by nearly 2 million Canadian men and women who served their country in time of war. Included in this number are thousands of Native people who joined the armed forces and fought in foreign lands. After the wars, Native veterans returned to face hardship, bigotry, loss of land, and did not receive all the benefits that non-Native people received. On our program today, I have Senator Len Marchand and Albert Saddleman, former chief of the Okanagan Indian Band, to talk about the upcoming Native Veteran Study. Welcome to Kla-How-Ya.
Thank you.
Senator Len Marchand, can you give us a background history on how the Native Veterans Study came about?
Well, how our people were treated after the wars has been hanging around for a long time. There have been a lot of horror stories out there that get dealt with from time to time, and then they've never ever really been resolved. It's been recognized, and now more in the last couple of years, a lot of the veterans have come to us in the Senate, the senators, and said, look, there's something has to be done. We're getting on. A lot of them are over 70, and they're very clear about it, saying, look, we're going to be going on to the happy hunting ground in not too long. So we don't want to leave before a lot of these things hanging around have been cleaned up. So that's why I made a commitment to them, along with a few others of my colleagues in the Senate, that hey, when this next Parliament comes up, as soon as the election was over, we'll start. And as a matter of fact, the second motion and this Parliament was mine, establishing the committee to investigate the situations that that our veterans faced after the First World War, the Second World War, and the Korean War. So we're just about to start. We're going to start with our hearings on March 16th. We'll start with the National Aboriginal Veterans Association. Then we'll hear from the national organizations, probably from the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Indian Affairs, and then we see where we go from there. We'll call this our first round, starting on March 16th.
Mm-hmm. Now, with us today is Albert Saddleman, whose father fought in the war. Could you give us some background information on your father's history during the war?
Well, I guess prior to the war, my dad was in the farming business. When I guess at the beginning of the Second World War, after it started, he enlisted with the army and fought overseas. Was fighting in Sicily, and he was killed in Sicily. And he didn't. Of course, he did not return. But talking with veterans, after they found out that my dad did not come back, and I've talked to quite a number of veterans, both here on our reserve out here and people from other reserves, and they're concerned about what has happened to them when they came home and became Indians again.
Before I ask you a second question, I'd like our audience to take note that we're going to be showing photos of Native veterans during the World War I, II, and the Korean War during our interview, just to make you more aware and see some of the people that were heroes of the Canadian Native heroes. And we'd like for you to share that with us. And Albert, in regards to how did it directly affect your family in regarding to the situation that your father was involved in?
Well, as I was saying, my dad was in the farming business, and after he left to go to war, that left my mother and my three sisters on their own. I wasn't born until after he was overseas. and he wasn't there too long before he, I guess, went to the happy hunting ground. But it left her, you know, in a bad situation where she had to raise 4 children. She eventually had to move in with my grandparents, and we all lived, you know, in a house at White Man's Creek. And you know, I and my sisters were being raised by my mother, my grandmother, and my grandfather. And of course, the farming didn't continue because there was nobody to carry it on at the time. He was, what I understand from my mother, grandfather, and grandmother, and other people around, you know, they said that he was, you know, becoming quite a successful farmer. You know, he was just getting started, and he learned the ropes, and you know, he knew how to go about it. He talked to one of the neighbors, and he said when he came back that they were going to expand the operations. They were going to do things in a bigger way. So you know, I guess immediately after his passing on, you know, right up until going through my teens and my sisters going through their teens, you know, they had to live their lives without a father, you know, to guide them through those years, I guess, when you mostly need a father. You know, we were denied that part of the family, and then in those days it's not like today where, you know, there's social assistance and there's other things that you know, people are able to survive on. You know, at that time the only type of work that my mother was able to get was working in the Chinese fields. And she did that during the summer, and as we grew up, that's exactly what we did too. You know, in order to get spending money, we had to also go work in the Chinese fields. And when I first started working there, it was 40 cents an hour. When my mother and my grandfather first started working there, it was
15 cents.
I think it was, yeah, 10 and 15.
10, 15 cents an hour.
Yeah,
You bet.
exactly.
And they worked 10 hours a day.
10 hours a day.
Started at 7 in the morning, and well, quit at 6 at night. So I remember very well some of those. I'm just a couple of years older than Albert, so I did the same thing. He got 40 cents. I started at 15 cents. Maybe that's all it was worth, but anyway, I remember those days very well.
Senator, in regards to, like, the veterans were treated as equals during the war. As soon as they got back home, why were they treated, why were they discriminated upon? Why were they treated bigotry? Why did they face hardship? Why was that situation?
It's hard to know, you know, but look at the history of our people, how we were treated overall. We didn't even get the federal vote until 1960. It wasn't until 1960 that we could buy liquor legally. Like when the veterans got home, they couldn't go and they couldn't join the Canadian Legion, for instance. They weren't the members of the Canadian Legion because they served liquor there, and they weren't allowed to serve liquor to Indians. And so who knows why we were discriminated against as a group of people. And another reason is Veterans Affairs Department didn't handle it themselves. They gave it over to Indian Affairs. And well, you know the history of Indian Affairs and how they've been so paternalistic over our people, and so right there was one big thing. And of course we weren't considered citizens neither, you know, without a vote, and we weren't citizens. And I don't know if you want to go into some of the horror stories that are around. One big complaint is that many of them lost their status as Indians when they came home, just because they were veterans. And they couldn't apply for land. Like most other veterans, the big thing was the Veterans Land Act, in which they got land. Now, if our people applied for land off a reserve, I'm told it was a condition that they gave up their status as Indians, so they could own land off a reserve. Another situation that Albert told me about was, and he reminded me, and some of the reserves, there were land taken away and given to white veterans. So who knows why these things were done? Who knows why we were treated the way we were in the beginning? You know, well, it's a long, awful story that you don't, I don't want to get into. We want to move forward from it, but we have to look back and understand and recognize the contribution that these people made, our people made in those wars. They made an immense contribution. Like one report I read, the 1919 annual report of the Department of Indian Affairs referred to the First World War and said that they called it the Head of the Lake Reserve, and we understand that. And it said, on our reserve, all of the able-bodied men between the ages of 20 and 35 were involved in the war effort, in the First World War effort. And you can go all across the country and find examples like this in terms of the participation rate of our people. We participated immensely in the First and Second World War, not so much in the Korean War, but the First and Second World War, only to come back to face the discrimination and bigotry and whatever that our people faced.
Looking at recognition, the booklet that we're looking at, the photos right now that was made, is that one way that the government tried to recognize Native people as heroes, as recognize their achievements, like you were mentioning, like this book that we're looking at right now?
I suppose it was done a couple of years ago, really, and it really is quite it's called Native Soldiers, Foreign Battlefields, and it tells some of the real stories, some of the stories of how our people participated in the wars, and some of them were absolute heroes, just real heroes. And so I think they're told pretty well in there. But the Senate committee, we want to go, of course, beyond that.
Yes.
So we want to recognize that as well and talk about the contributions. But we also want to talk about the problems that they've had when they came home and try to suggest some ways that it can be alleviated. I don't think we can ever alleviate, ever undo the things that have been done to them. We can never really alleviate all the hurts that are out there, but we have to try. We'll certainly have to, do some things, recognize unequivocally that the Canadian people owe a great debt of gratitude to our people in the way they participated in the wars.
Albert, you attempted to get some reconciliation a few years back. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I guess it was probably 1970 or 71 that I talked to my sisters and I said, look, we should do something in recognition and in remembrance of our dad. And I talked to them about a scholarship. And I said, what I'll do, I'll go to the Legion and I will ask if they will make a contribution. I think at the time it was $500, and we would put in $500 so that there would be a $1,000 scholarship. Now, back in 1970, money was, to me and my family was hard to come by. But we said we would make that sacrifice, providing, of course, that the Legion would also contribute. I talked to a couple of the non-Native veterans, and they said that they would, support it. I wrote a letter, and I believe they took the letter to the Legion, and they called me up one day and said that they wouldn't be able to support that effort. So I haven't done anything with it since, but I still like the idea of a scholarship to be in memory of all the Native veterans, not only my dad, but there's hundreds of Native soldiers that did not return, and certainly we have to carry on with life, and I would like to have the younger people, recognize that a lot of our people did go to the First and Second and the Korean War. What Glenn was talking about earlier about the people at Head the Lake, you know, in the First World War, where just about every able-bodied man from the Okanagan went. And that happened all across the country. But the other thing that happened was the Native communities raised thousands and thousands of dollars to help with the war effort. And when we, you know, when we talk about the First World War and the Second World War, you know, the Depression years, money was hard to come by. So, you know, when the community can make that effort, you know, and get in there and try their level best to, you know, to support Canada, and it must be very devastating for the people that did go over to come back and then, you know, face this what I would call out-and-out racism.
Yes. And in regards to the accomplishments, I just want to read some statistics that during the First World War, at least 4,000 natives volunteered to join the Allied forces to fight in the European battlefields. More than 3,000 Canadian Indians served during the Second World War, and it's estimated that several hundred natives volunteered to help the United Nations defend South Korea during the Korean War. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of numbers we're talking there. And do you feel that with this inquiry, this Native Veteran Study, that I know we're never going to be able to, like you mentioned, heal what has happened, but what type of solutions are we looking at here for the inquiry?
We'll be getting recommendations from the veterans when we start our hearings, but I want to, right off the bat, say I really like the idea of scholarships that Albert has talked about, because set up a scholarship foundation to recognize the veterans and those who gave their lives in the wars makes a lot of good sense, because it would go on forever. And I'm very much in favor of that, and I will, you know, I hope Britt will send me a little note about how he feels about it, and so they could put it forward in the committee. And also, we'll be looking at, you know, how it's done. But the attractive part of it is that it would go on for a long, well, go on forever in a foundation, and also promote education among our people, which is so important, you know, to our futures. Our young people have to get a good education in order to have a good future. So those aspects really are very attractive to me as one member of the committee.
Mm-hmm. Now, in regards to, again, talking about the achievements of Native people during the war, in that book, you know, reading over it, it's like there was not a lot of Native people that played key roles in the war. And I think, what can friendship centers, what can other organizations, Native organizations, what can you suggest we can do to help support this Native Veteran Study?
Well, we would certainly like a letter from this center and all the centers, you know, in support of the effort. Mm-hmm. Maybe a national effort, or but really individual efforts. Okay. What we're going to be really impressed with too, of course, is the stories that Albert has about what his father did, and other veterans who were home and the situations that they faced. We're going to try to hear from a lot of veterans, but maybe we don't, like I say, a lot of the information is there now. There's been some work done on it over the years, and I think our effort is not going to be so much a matter of reinventing the wheel. It's going to be a matter of pulling together a lot of information that's out there and making some recommendations that will recognize the contribution that the veterans have made. That's what they've asked for, a lot of them.
With Native Veteran Study, Albert, there's a lot of facts that we've talked about today, which is the truth about how Native people were treated, Native veterans were treated after post-war. You've been involved with, like I said, trying to get reconciliation in the last 20 years. How do you feel about this inquiry personally, about its achievements, the possibility of some solutions?
Well, I think the first thing this inquiry does, or the study is going to do, is make people aware of what really happened. You know, there's, we would imagine, even amongst the Okanagan band membership, that you know, they're not aware of actually, you know, the things that the veterans faced. And when I talk about veterans, you know, not only the men were there, but we had a lot of ladies that went, you know, signed up with the Army and the Navy. I think you know, it's going to take a load off the veterans' shoulders now that are out there, because I've talked to a few of them, and you know, they're just dying to tell you, you know, the things that I guess have been bothering them for a lot of years. One of the things that they talk about is being treated fairly and equally. You know, they want to be, you know, with their pensions, they want to make sure that their pensions is at par with the non-Native veterans. They want, and I guess that's all Native people ever ask for, is to be treated fairly and be treated equally. And you know, when they talk to other people, other veterans, and they know that they're not being treated fairly, you know, this really bothers them. You know, they're treated the way they are because when they got out of the Army, they were, once they took that uniform off, they were Indians again. And while they were over there, you know, they talk about you know, fighting side by side with other nationalities, and the other veterans would treat them just like anybody else. You know, there was no, you know, you're an Indian and I have to move over here a little bit. You know, that they went hand in hand, side by side, and while they were over there and fought this. But when they got back, and it wasn't the non-Native veterans that treated them differently, it was, I guess, the long arm of the government that, you know, made sure that you know, that when they went back to the reserves, that they were Indians again.
The government told the Native people, or probably most of the veterans, to keep quiet, not to talk about about anything to do with what they were involved with during the war. Can you go on a little bit more about that?
And I think it happened both between the non-Native veterans and the Native veterans. You know, they were told never to talk about what happened during the war, whether it was over there, before they went over there, when they got there, when they came back. And you know, I don't know why I have a suspicious mind, but you know, I think
good reason.
The reason that they were told not to talk about was because of the difference in the payouts, difference in the pensions, and you know, the difference that when you got back that you were going to be a Native person again. Because you know, talking with the veterans, you know, and I've talked to a few of them, you know, and of course they in turn talk to non-Native veterans, and they say, well, you know, when the non-Native veterans came back, they were eligible for $6,000. We only got $2,200. There's a difference there. They were eligible for business loans. We weren't. They were eligible for housing. We weren't. You know, they said that the department, that was their responsibility. And you know, all these things, you know, when you talk to them, you know it hurts them, and they want something done about it. And that's why I think that, you know, they were told to remain silent. Because after all, it doesn't take an intelligent person to find out what actually went on when you were over there. I mean, you were fighting a war, you know, to either kill or be killed, I guess. So we all know that.
Yep, that's right.
When you get back and these things starts over the years unfolding, you know, and that's why I say I have that very suspicious mind. Is the reason that they wanted things kept quiet was because of the things that took place after they got back.
Another horror story that I just remembered is that for land, some of the Indians were given land on their own reserves as veterans. Now, land that they already owned, land that they already had a right to, and so. But,
in regards to the inquiry, the study, we got suspicious minds. Are we going to get, is this going to be fair, equal? I think it's going to come out Are the government going to be able to listen to some of the mistakes that they did in the past?
Absolutely. You know, there are 3 of us on the committee who will be, well, 1 Inuit and 2 Indians on the committee. So you can count on it, you know, that we'll dig up everything that we can dig up and try to, you know, put everything on the table. And but you know, we have some veterans on board as well who are going to be with us and who are very supportive of the study, like Senator Earl Hastings of Alberta, you know, lives in Calgary, Senator Jack Marshall of Newfoundland, or veteran Senator Gil Mulgat, who's the deputy leader of the in the Senate on the government side, from Winnipeg. And so the indications I've had so far, we've had just absolutely great support. And when I introduced my motion, there was not a dissenting voice. It was absolutely unanimously passed. And so I think we've made a good start, and we're going to, well, you can count on it, we're going to do our best to do a good job.
Make it fair. A lot of families probably looking for that recognition of their mom and dad who fought in the war and would like to be recognized not only in fairness, but also be recognized as that they were racist. They received racism, and I think admitting to that might heal a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, you know, you asked really why it was done, and look at there was a land treaty commission going on now.
Right.
And you know, why were our lands taken out from under us the way they were? We weren't able to preempt land like the new settlers were, and so on, so on, so on. And Banff National Park, for instance, is twice as large as all of the reserve lands that we have in BC, Indian reserve lands. So look, the context was there, and I suppose we could suspect that our veterans weren't going to get a fair deal as soon as they were under the auspices of the Department of Indian Affairs. So
I see. Okay. We're hoping that the inquiry is going to be happening, like you said, pretty soon. Within September, we should be receiving a report.
Well, the outside date we have put on it is report back to the Senate by September 15th. Now, that was just an outside date.
Okay.
My wish, and the wish of a lot of my committee colleagues, is that we could complete it by the end of June.
June. We're hoping that a follow-up program, just to let our audience know that there's a lot of people interested in this issue, that's to update them in regarding to what is happening and what kind of solutions. Are we looking at possibility of someone oppositioning this? Is there an opposition to this inquiry?
I don't know. I hopefully not. There are no indications so far that we may have some debate about what solutions will be.
Right.
But right now, there's absolutely no opposition. The opposition, the Conservative Party is the majority in the Senate. So as a matter of fact, it will be a Conservative chairing the committee. I chaired the committee before, the Standing Senate Committee on Aboriginal Peoples. I've chaired it before, and as a matter of fact, I was very instrumental in getting it established in the Senate. Okay. But now they're a majority, and I can count, and they've taken the committee as one that they want to chair, so I can't do much about it, but I'm a co-chair, I'm a vice chairman of the committee, and I've been very active in, well, doing my motion and doing the motion to get the committee, get this reference before the committee, and also getting, I've been on the phone, well, almost steady for the last couple of weeks, for instance, getting things organized, ready to go for that March 16th start-up date. Okay,
well, it's the end of our program. I really want to wish you, Senator Marchand, all the best of luck in the Native Veteran Study. I hope to have an update soon regarding to for our viewers and for our Native veterans who are in the local community. Albert, thank you for taking the time to come in on Kla-How-Ya.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Senator Lynn Marchand. And with the last note, I'd like to leave you with a poem that's part of that book that we've been looking through this evening. We, your sons and daughters of today, remember you, spirits of the past wars and battles. We stand for peace on this planet called Mother Earth. We are armed not with terrible weapons of technology, but with the wisdom of the elders. We have not forgotten, we will not forget. We will live for our children and the future. We leave you with that. Thank you for watching Kla-How-Ya. This is Rick Sagiadan saying so long for now.